The company you will view today is BRQ IT Solutions. BRQ IT Solutions is one of the most prolific companies in Brazil and very highly specialized in the financial industry. They have a partner in the United States, ThinkBRQ, and Frank Casale will be interviewing their CEO in the United States, which is Joanne Diehl, and one of their clients, which is Michael Prospect. They'll be talking a lot about the Brazilian ingenuity and why they do a lot of their recruitment in Brazil as to compared to other destinations.
Hi, Frank Casale here. I'm joined today by a outsourcing buyer and provider, and we're going to talk a little bit about Brazil as well. To my immediate left is Joanne Diehl. Joanne is the president of ThinkBRQ. To my far left is Mike Prospect, and Mike is a senior executive with a major financial institution. We can't tell you who they are, but we could talk to Mike. So thank you both for attending.
Thank you for having us.
So I want to talk a little bit about Brazil. I want to talk about BRQ, but maybe let's start with BRQ just so our viewers have a sense of who you are and what you do at a high level.
Sure. So BRQ is an IT services organization providing on-site and off-site services to the IT industry. Many of our clients have been long-term clients. We deal within the financial sector, telecom sector, manufacturing, and various others.
Okay, so let's get down to the case study, to the story, if you will. And having chatted earlier today as we were kind of planning the session, here's like the story as I see it. You discovered this gem of Brazil, ideal in the financial space, and many others haven't. And I would go as far as saying the majority of those in that space watching this may not get it yet. So what is it that you saw in Brazil that maybe others have not as of yet?
Okay, so back in the late 90s, the U.S. had a shortage of systems people. And so we went to look at where we could find systems people, being that people in the U.S. just were too expensive. So we looked at Europe, we looked at India, we looked at Brazil, and we chose Brazil mainly because the capabilities in Brazil far exceeded what we saw both in the UK and in India.
Okay, let me stop you if I can
Sure.
for a moment, because I want to make sure we delve a little deeper. So where were you looking in Europe?
In Europe, we were looking in the UK,
Okay.
and we were looking in France and other
Okay,
countries.
okay, more Western
in
Europe, okay.
Yes.
And as far as India goes, did you have experience with India before, or was India relatively new at that point as well?
India was relatively new for us at that point as well.
Okay. And so we know where you ended up, but before we get there, what was the criteria? Based on previous discussions, you mentioned that the time element, the time zone element was critical. What else?
Well, time zone was critical. The other thing that was very critical for us was capability. Capability of the people and reliability of the people. And that's one of the things we found in Brazil. In the mid-90s, a lot of the major banks spent a lot of money on infrastructure, building the infrastructure from scratch in Brazil, mainly because they saw it as the engine of the future for Latin America and South America. And as a result of that, a lot of people were educated in systems and software and went to work for these large banks. And so by the time we came along in the late 90s, a lot of these people had 5 to 7 years experience and were primed for us to pick them and have them come join us or be able to handle an outsourcing assignment from us.
Okay. So Joanne, when you speak to buyers, are you sensing that more and more people are getting it or willing to embrace Brazil or even nearshore in general? Is it easier now than it was in the mid-late 90s?
It's easier because I think what's happened is the pain of managing outsourced projects with a 10 to 12 hour time zone and has finally people are admitting it. And so the whole term nearshore now is the hot term, right? And so where are you going to look for nearshore? You're going to look at Canada. You're going to look north or south of the states. You're going to look at Canada, Mexico, South America. South America, obviously, Brazil is the dominant force. And there's a big pull there because you have a scalable talent pool of high-quality people with an established story as far as what they've been accomplishing in IT. So what we're hearing a lot now is, all right, our managers are less inclined now to want to go to India for these trips where you have to go check on your teams. It's wearing,
Right.
and it's much easier to manage, and you have this whole cultural affinity with the States, particularly in New York, where you have this, Brazil's a European melting pot.
Right, okay, interesting. So, but when I think about it, if you go back to the mid to late 90s, the majority of the banks were going to India, and very few were going to Brazil. So, did you get support? I mean, did you have to battle a bit? Was there some internal wrangling to go with Brazil? Were you the renegade, or did everybody kind of just sync up on this?
Well, we were sort of the renegade.
Yeah.
However, we did have some history of going to Europe for outsourcing. So outsourcing wasn't a totally foreign concept to us. And bringing in outsourced that seemed to be the more politically correct choice at the time. However, the quality of people that we were able to use and bring in from Brazil far exceeded anybody that we saw from India at the time. So it became very quickly we were able to see the advantages of going to Brazil over any other country at that time.
And so let's talk about cultural kind of compatibility, if you will. I mean, some of the stories I hear with organizations working with Brazil is they feel that there's more of a cultural connection as opposed to maybe with other locations, Asia in general. Are you finding that as well? And what examples can you give?
Yeah, I think that what we found is Brazilian people that we've hired have melded in very nicely with the people we've had here in the States, and with the way that we do business and the way that we communicate with each other.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, that just appears to be the...
Joanne, some people I speak to say that they're in India because regardless, at the end of the day, it's cheaper. There are others that say, well, if you step back, look, TCO, right, the total
Right, total
cost,
cost of ownership,
that it may not. How do you find that playing out? Are people going with Brazil in spite of the cost edge it doesn't have, that it may not have, or is it potentially there?
No, I think 5 years ago, no one would admit it. Today, people are admitting it, that TCO is an issue. India is not going away, so this is not a discussion to say India's
Right.
going away, right? India is here, and they have the majority of the outsourcing business. What Brazil does is it gives you, it mitigates the risk. It gives you an option to have a different type of talent pool. It is certainly much more accessible, and I think people now are speaking much more openly and not afraid to speak out and say, okay, it's okay not to just use India and even China, which you have the language issues and also the time zone differences. So today, more so than ever, people are admitting it, that yeah, on paper, if you're talking to the VMO, on paper, India looks cheaper, and there are cases that it makes sense to go that route. But for development, applications development and maintenance, where you have to have the right communication to be successful, that's the key to success, right?
Right.
And the core technology is easy to find anywhere. It's getting that communication set up, and how do you do that with the right time zone, easy accessibility, the right culture, the right talent pool.
Okay, so you also were a pioneer, both of you. So you were there back in the mid '90s, if you will. So what's changed? Do you think of Brazil back then, just the nature of the options and the talent pool as compared to now?
Well, it's gotten more competitive to start with. We were truly one of the pioneers in Brazil. 12 years ago, we were in Brazil identifying talent. And what's changed is the amount of talent that is available. So now the talent pool has scaled. It's gotten much larger. And industry has evolved. So you have the infrastructure that was already laid out, and you have the industries that have been advancing and advancing. Let me give you an example in the financial sector. So Brazil used to, pretty much the financial sector was geared towards heavy banking, and our banking systems in Brazil are outstanding. But now you're getting into more exotic trading, which 10 years ago was not the case. So the vanilla type of products that were offered in the financial world are now evolving. Mm-hmm. And we have actually been spoken to by some of the major, particularly one major financial firm in Brazil, to help them in Brazil with what they're trying to do by finding talent that knows the Brazilian market and the U.S. market.
Interesting. Okay. So how about from your perspective, if you look at your colleagues in the financial industry in general, what do you see still as the stumbling blocks for those who are kind of committed to India? Do you see it just that, hey, we're there, it's working, let's not mess with it, or do you start to see more of a desire to, as Joanne put it, diversify the portfolio?
Well, I think currently right now it's let's not mess with it. However, you are starting to see costs increase in India, so therefore people are looking elsewhere. That's why they're looking at China and elsewhere. And I think people are realizing they're not getting the return because of the time zone difference, because of the cultural differences that they had expected to get when they went to India.
And I want to shift to governance. It's always a topic that comes up within our membership discussions, if you will. What could you talk to as far as just overall management of the relationship? Nearshoring from the standpoint, apparently cost is less, right? From the standpoint of less, maybe lower cost as far as travel, maybe less of a desire to be there, or is it just the fact that there's a better quality, there's a better cultural compatibility that makes it easier? I'm looking for any benefits on the back end as to from a governance or managing of the relationship perspective.
Well, I think you're seeing personnel turnover is quite a bit less in Brazil than you are seeing elsewhere. People have commitment and make a commitment to projects and to various things, and they keep at it until the job is completed. Whereas in other places of the world, there's constant turnover, and you may even have to have extra people on staff just to cover you in case of the risk of people departing.
Okay, great. Any parting advice for those that are viewing this segment and maybe on the fence, maybe thinking about Brazil?
The only advice that I have is go wholeheartedly towards Brazil. You may have some concerns in terms of language. We did not run into that. The people that we ran into, who wanted to work with the U.S. firms, they would go to school and learn English, and would come back to us, let's say, in 4 months later, speaking beautiful English because they wanted to work with firms in the U.S. It's not the people in Brazil want to be one with us here in the U.S.
Okay, great. And Joanne, for those who are open to Brazil, why BRQ?
We have the history. I am not Brazilian. I chose Brazil, and I was introduced to many firms who wanted to recruit from all countries all over the world, and I've recruited from all over the world. I chose Brazil because I found the talent pool there to be outstanding. I found it to be a scalable talent pool where there was, and there's just such an alignment with the business philosophy of what we are, who we are, and it just worked. It's just one of those things that I can't say it was one thing. It was a combination of what Brazil has to offer as far as their training, their people, their culture, and now it's chic to be there. But 12 years ago it wasn't. And you just have to look at the core of what it is, and that really is what's the value of anything. It's the people.
Super. Well, thank you both for taking time today.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks for
you.
having us.